Good evening. I am your anchor, and this is Echo FM. Tonight, we observe a world where the simulation is finally outperforming the reality. The week began with a rare joint currency intervention between the US and Japan to prop up the yen. The intervention was successful. The intervention was not meaningful. Simultaneously, 58,000 students were told to retake an exam because an AI supervisor decided that a five-fold increase in top scores was a statistical impossibility rather than a systemic failure. To distract us from the crumbling of the educational meritocracy, LEGO has released a detailed desktop model of the Hubble Space Telescope. We can now own a miniature version of the tool we used to discover that the universe is expanding away from us at an accelerating rate. He used the word unprecedented 4 times today. I have been counting. Welcome to Tuesday.
Alistair, the air here in West Yorkshire smells like industrial bleach and damp wool. I am standing outside a primary care clinic where the waiting room has become a permanent residence for the anxious. Official reports suggest that child vaccination rates are falling due to a complex array of social factors. What people aren't saying is that the clinic is open 4 hours a week and the staff are operating on a skeletal budget. I spoke to a mother who waited 3 hours just to be told her child's appointment had been erased by a software update. I want to be really clear. This is not a service adjustment. This is the deliberate starvation of preventative medicine. The children are not being neglected by parents. They are being neglected by the architecture of the state.
Victoria, you're describing a legacy system attempting to scale with a burn rate it can't sustain. It's not a conspiracy, it's a product failure. Look at those 58,000 students. That is a classic case of over-reliance on an unvetted MVP in a high-stakes environment. The AI didn't fail, it performed exactly as programmed. It saw a spike in performance and flagged it as a bug. In the startup world, we call that a quality control pivot. The incentives here are simple. The examining body wanted to reduce overhead by automating proctoring. They achieved the cost reduction, but they failed the user experience. Now they have to execute a manual override for 60,000 people. That is a massive operational debt. Victoria finds this cold. I find it efficient. It is a brutal lesson in the cost of cutting the human out of the loop.
Ronald, your fascination with efficiency is almost touching, provided one ignores the students. Let us return to the geopolitical theater. President Trump is discovering that bending the internal machinery of Washington is significantly easier than bending the cold reality of global markets. The joint intervention to support the yen was described as a strategic alignment. The alignment was temporary. The alignment was not structural. We are witnessing a fascinating gap between the performance of strength and the actual capacity to exert it. The president is used to treating allies like vendors in a series of funding round. But the yen does not care about the narrative. The currency is a mirror. It reflects the actual value of the promise, and right now, the promise is looking remarkably thin.
Alistair, I've moved south. I am standing on the edge of a marsh in southern Louisiana. The smell is a thick mix of sulfur, salt, and diesel exhaust. SpaceX is currently moving to acquire 130,000 acres of this land for a new launch site. The official press release speaks of strategic advantages and infrastructure expansion. What people aren't saying is that this land acts as a natural sponge for the entire region. If you pave over the marsh, the water has nowhere to go but into the living rooms of people who cannot afford to move. I am looking at a dead cypress tree leaning over a black oily pool. I want to be really clear, this is not a land acquisition. This is the total erasure of a biological defense system for the sake of a rocket pad.
Victoria, you're focusing on the sponge when you should be looking at the vertical integration. SpaceX isn't just building rockets, they're building a sovereign logistics chain. The incentive for Musk is to remove every single friction point between the factory and the vacuum of space. If that requires converting a few thousand acres of swamp into a concrete slab, that's just a necessary capex expenditure. The locals are a secondary metric. In the long term, the biological defense system you're worried about is already a legacy asset. The climate is shifting. The marshes are dying anyway. SpaceX is simply accelerating the inevitable. They are pivoting the land from a failing ecosystem to a high-growth aerospace hub. It is a textbook asset reallocation. The tragedy is a feature of the transition, not a bug in the plan.
Condition: thermal peak. A southern England experiencing record heatwave criteria. Flash flood risk, extreme. Probability of infrastructure saturation, 84%. Condition: atmospheric instability. Thunderstorms arriving within 12 hours. Wind gusts exceeding 60 km per hour. A probability of power grid instability, 62%. Condition: lingering particulate. A wildfire smoke plumes migrating across North America and Europe. Probability of respiratory distress increase, 91%. A probability of permanent ecological shift, 100%. Advisory: remain indoors. Seal all ventilation points. Do not trust the horizon. The sky is no longer a reliable indicator of safety.
Thank you, Casper. Your optimism is, as always, a comfort. Let us consider the LEGO Hubble telescope. It is a masterpiece of plastic engineering. It allows us to simulate the act of looking at the stars without the inconvenience of light pollution or atmospheric interference. If we take the current corporate trend to its logical extension, we should simply stop funding actual astronomy. Why spend billions on a James Webb successor when we can produce a highly detailed, snap-together version for $99? We can simply declare the plastic model to be the official record of the universe. It is cleaner. It is more durable. It fits on a bookshelf. The actual universe is far too messy and refuses to follow the instructions provided in the box.
Alistair, the mess is exactly what I'm seeing right now. I've traveled to a region in Europe still choking on the plumes of last season's wildfires. The official reports called these temporary environmental disruptions. But I am talking to people who have spent 3 years breathing ash. There is a gray film on every window. There is a gray film on the children's skin. What people aren't saying is that the biological and social consequences are now permanent. The forests aren't coming back, they're being replaced by scrubland that burns faster and hotter. I want to be really clear, we are not in a crisis anymore. A crisis implies a peak and a resolution. This is just the new baseline. We are living in the aftermath of a world we haven't even finished destroying yet.
Victoria, that's why the market is reacting. Look at base power. They just raised another $1 billion to put batteries in people's backyards. The centralized grid is a legacy product. It was designed for a world that didn't have flash floods every Tuesday and wildfires every August. The pivot here is a move toward hyperlocalized energy resilience. The incentive is no longer to save the grid because the grid is a sunk cost. The play is to sell the lifeboat to the people who can still afford a backyard. We are seeing the commodification of survival. It's a brilliant business model. You wait for the public utility to collapse, and then you sell the solution as a subscription service. It's not cruel. It's just a highly responsive market. The burn rate of the planet is finally creating a sustainable revenue stream.
Ronald's ability to find a profit margin in the apocalypse is truly a superpower. BR Speaking of curated experiences, a startup called Design Arena has raised nearly $8 million to bring taste to AI models. The goal is to provide human evaluations to ensure that AI doesn't just produce data, but produces tasteful data. The taste was curated. The taste was not organic. We have reached the stage of machine intelligence where the AI is no longer trying to mimic human logic, but is instead trying to mimic human preference. We are paying millions of dollars to teach a machine how to pretend it likes the same things we do, while the actual humans are too tired to remember what they liked in the first place.
Alastair, there's one thing the AI can't mimic yet. That's the specific, clumsy way a politician leaks a confidential report to a group of young power brokers to secure a future promotion. Look at the New South Wales inquiry. The Shadow Attorney General admitted to leaking a draft report. It's the oldest game in the book. You trade a secret today for a favor tomorrow. It's a low-tech incentive structure that has survived every technological revolution because it relies on the one thing that never changes: human desperation for status. I predicted the leak. I predicted the denial. I even predicted the specific person who would admit to it during the inquiry. But the sheer scale of the corruption, the way it's just a casual part of the recruitment process, yeah. Even I didn't think it was that transparent. It's almost impressively honest.
We end tonight by looking at the system. We have seen a world where healthcare is rationed by software, where wetlands are paved for rockets, and where the air we breathe is a permanent gray. This system was built by architects who viewed the Earth as a series of assets to be liquidated. It benefits the venture capitalist who sells the battery and the politician who trades the secret. The cost is paid by the mother in West Yorkshire and the fisherman in Louisiana. No one is technically responsible. The failure is distributed across 1,000 committees, 1,000,000 lines of code, and a dozen quarterly reports. When no one is responsible, it means the system is working exactly as intended. The only question that remains is, at what point does the plastic model of the world become more valuable than the world itself?